Hi guys, it's Anna. It's been a while. It's been about a month since I put out my last episode, but I'm getting back into it. I've had a lot of shakeups in my life, job-wise, emotional-wise, per usual for me as a Cancer with a Scorpio moon. But it's chill. It happens. But I'm back on the horse. I've been quiet, and I think people might think, "Oh, is she still doing this?" Yes, I'm still doing this. Um, It is hard to get things in order and also to be creative. But other than that, yeah. Hello. Welcome back. I think this is episode 5, 6. I think it's 6, if I remember right. I'm pretty sure it's 6. Um, but hello. I don't think I've properly introduced myself, and if I have, we'll do it again right now. But hello. My name is Anna Ferster. I've been studying astrology now for about 6, probably almost 7 years at this point, but I think it's about 6 years. I've been studying since June of 2017. It's been a minute. I graduated college in 2022. I was a comms major. I feel like at some point that will come back up and up, throughout this podcast, that I'm a comms major. Thanks to communications, I learned how to make podcasts, which is really cool. This is my third podcast. The rest were, my first podcast was called Lorecast, where I talk about game lore. And my second podcast was called The Research Journey, which I talked about research journeys, basically. Just talked about research and people who do research around my university. But that was for an internship I did. But yeah, what else? What is it? I'm kind of, another personal thing about me, I'm sick of making content for, I've barely been doing it for that long, but I get so sick of things easily because I'm so I think being a Cancer is really hard because you're so emotionally, it's not even just mood. It's like every part of your life is just so emotionally charged. Like, for instance, my mom's a Capricorn, and that's again, the axis where it's Capricorn and Cancer. And my mom can just do things because of the need for money or the need for just in a sense, purpose. But me, I need to be emotionally connected to do anything. Or I just get so unenthralled. I get so unenthralled with, not with work, because I like work. I just like to do my own work. I prefer, which you might ask, well, Anna, if you like to do your own work, where's your episodes of your podcast? My son is in the 6th house, if you know what that means. I'm a bottle of stress all the time. I feel like this is getting too personal, but that's okay. I'm just kind of looking to be a little bit candid in this episode because the rest have been super scripted, and I'm kind of looking to change that. But we're going to see how this episode goes out, and I'm looking just to see, scripted episodes versus personal episodes. But I'll get to that in a sec. I'll go back where I was going. But my mom, who's a Capricorn, she can, just do things. And like I said, it's very hard for me to do things. So one thing I'm looking to do more so is to be able to consistently make my own work, make my own content, because I do freelance and I'm trying to get jobs in content creation and just media stuff, and it's really hard. I find it very hard from time to time, even though I can do it and I can do it pretty well, at least that I think, is that it's not my own stuff. It's not my own stuff at all. And so it becomes so unenthralling. And I think that's a big thing with other Cancers, where it's just doing other people's work for them is just so unenthralling. Me, I'm I just want to work on my own creative projects. I don't want to work on yours. I want to work on mine. But so, yeah. Anything else personal that I want to talk about? Let me think. I'm really just excited to get back into doing this podcast more consistently. If you've seen on my Instagram, where I highlight and I try to be active as I can, I haven't been active at all over the last 2 months. I find it very hard to promote. That's one thing I'm really working on, learning how to promote my own content. But promote this podcast, promote other things that I do. But, I've been trying to make schedules and trying to figure out how often upload, but it just hasn't been working out. And it's mainly because, like I said before, scripted episodes take a really long time to make. I remember when I was doing the last episode, I had been doing that all December. And you might think, it wasn't that long. It wasn't, but it took 15 pages of content in order to get that much. And so I'm thinking about doing this podcast in kind of two ways, where it's like I still make like really historical, because I like those episodes. They just take more time to make, a lot of resources, to make episodes that, take a lot of historical information, resources, sources in general, like academic sources, everything, to do maybe those once a month or even maybe every 2 months. It depends. I'm just trying to get back on the horse. So it's like, I don't know. I think the next one will probably come out within the next few weeks or most likely in March. But because I'm looking to do a really in-depth episode on the houses and I want to make it good. And so I think part of it will be me talking candidly and then me referencing a lot of information that I use. It's just going to take some time. And I'm just trying to get stuff out there rather than stress myself out about, getting a lot of information and getting a lot of, referenced information, good information. And so I want to do that. And then I want to do more candid episodes. So non-scripted episodes where I'm just talking to you. I'm talking to you about astrology. I'm looking to take more questions. I'm looking to just talk about astrology from my perspective, talk about transits, talk about what's happening, kind of give you a translated outlook on astrology if you don't know much about astrology. I know it's very intimidating. I know it can be, you're listening to an episode and you're like, I have no idea what that means. Trust me, that was me for about 2.5 years, 3 years. There were so many things where I had to stay away from because I was like, I simply don't understand. It's going to take a minute and then I can get there. But because a lot of people, and I think a lot of seasoned astrologers, like I said, I think in the first or second episode, they don't know how to kind of retranslate. I think when you get into a certain level of knowing something, it's very hard to just talk about it like, I guess, like a kindergarten or a first grade teacher would talk about things, where it's like, it's all spread out and it's all very clear. So, people who aren't very, knowledgeable can understand. And so I'm not trying to treat any of you guys like kindergartners, but I want to make things very clear because I don't want this to be, a one thing I have is like with people who teach on TikTok and just in general, I'm not a hater. I'm just like things where I'm just like, oh my God, that's so lame. Where it's like, and I get it. Trust me, from someone who comes from like, the media world, I understand why things are framed the way they are. But I don't like when, people on TikTok make like spooky videos or like are very like Libra, Gemini, Aquarius, this will happen to you then, and this, like very direct and fearful. I don't like that because it's not fun. It's lame. It kind of just tricks you, the viewer, into thinking this is going to happen to me. It's like, I think, sadly, what has happened with like tarot readers, where it's like very like, it's almost too much at this point. And so I want to put more content out there that is very candid, very nice, not directed in any type of way, besides with what accurate historical stuff I know, and then also what I know from, seasoned astrologers, what good information or what I think is good information. You can always, what I always think is, look it up yourself, do your own research, go on Google Scholar, find whatever databases that you have available to you and do your own research. I think that's really good and I think that's really helpful. But this is just my perspective. And so I obviously talk from my own perspective, and then, yeah, you guys can, if you guys like this, you can keep on listening. If you don't, you don't. But I don't want to frame anything, negatively or to make it spookier or to make you fearful. I just want to make good stuff that people like to listen to and continue on like that and just talk about something I'm very passionate about. And I'm trying to actually reignite my passion for astrology because I've been in more stress recently, and astrology has always been something that has allowed me to just enjoy my time. And I'm trying to reignite that in myself. So, yeah. So, that was a bit of a long intro, but I hope it gives you a little sense of where I'm at and what I'm trying to do. So, today I think I'm basically just, for this episode, I'm basically just going to go over common astrological or astrology misconceptions and give you my perspective on what I think. Kind of just keep talking. Just see what this episode becomes, because I'm just trying to get myself into used to doing something that is non-scripted. Something where I'm just talking to you and seeing where that goes. So let's start with the first one. Oh, frick. Astrology predicts your future with certainty. I basically just got this from a random website. Astrology predicts your future with certainty. What is this question trying to ask? Sometimes I'm dumb. Sometimes I read questions. I'm like, what does that even mean? I'm going to skip that for now. All right. Your zodiac sign determines your personality. Okay, so I'm assuming that in that second question, they're talking about your sun sign. So yeah, in a way, I mean, when you're talking about your sun sign, you're talking about your personality. Or not your personality necessarily, your ego. And so you're holding on to like what identity you hold that you've created, yourself through your lived experience. So what, through your life has attributed to how you act like, what ego you have, what things you hold dear, what things you associate with yourself, that kind of stuff. And so, me as a Cancer sun, I gotta be honest, I always knew I was like, yeah, I'm a Cancer. Yeah, that makes sense. And it varies. I would say my personality is extremely emotionally driven. I am extremely emotionally driven. So, I would say, I don't think that's necessarily a misconception. I would say that's true, but it really depends on you and your chart. I mean, I think a lot of people have disconnect somewhere. And I think a lot of people don't quite, or I think one thing where it's like, when you're talking about your zodiac sign, your sun sign, and how that connects to your personality, I think a lot of people hear a lot of just very basic, things that are attributed to their sign. And so they're like, of course they're like, there's so much more to me. It's like if you're an Aries and someone tells you, oh, you're intense, you're like, well, okay, that's anyone can be intense. That's not like why is Aries specifically so intense? Like you can't, there's a lot of basic things attributed to that. And so I think it is, a misconception when people are thinking like, oh, I think this is also what a lot of people think prior to learning about a birth chart and like the full extent, what astrology is like to its fullest extent. When you think, oh, it's just sun sign, when you think, oh, you're just one zodiac sign, you're like, of course there's more to me. I'm not just this one singular thing. And so, yeah, I would say it is a misconception because you got to look at your whole chart, but it's also like, I'd say it's somewhat it's somewhat true, but yeah, it really depends. Because a lot of people relate and a lot of people don't. It really depends on what things are aspecting what. But I'm also a water moon, so I think that, really nails things in the coffin there. And I also have a Scorpio Mars, and I have a lot of things in me that are very passionate, and I think that drive me to be emotionally driven. And so maybe if I had more of another element in my chart besides like all that water, I'd feel differently about my Cancer sun. But it really depends. Let's look at the second one. Astrology is scientifically proven. This is not something, I mean, I don't think it's scientifically proven. I think it's still considered, obviously, what is it? what's the term? Similar to like tarot and stuff, you guys know the term. But I don't think it is. I think it's something where it's just like it has a very spiritually driven basis with astrology, because you're believing that there's some kind of meaning to be derived from the movement of the stars. And so, of course, there can't be an exact way to scientifically prove or disprove that. So it's not really scientifically, I don't think there's anything that's been scientifically proven, obviously, but no, I don't think it is. But I think it's like, to me, I'm like, it's kind of like when you run into people and they're like, it's the sad thing where it's just like when you talk about astrology and then you're immediately not taken seriously. To me, I'm like, okay, like it's like, to be honest, I'm used to that. I'm a woman. And so it's like, okay, like that was already there. That was already there. Like there was no way as a woman I was going to be somewhat taken seriously in this world. No. And then you add astrology onto that and you're like, oh my God, you're just a dumb woman who believes the stars have meanings. Oh my God. Yeah, I am. I am a dumb woman who believes the stars have meaning. But here we are. But to me, I'm like, there's many things in the universe that they can't explain. I'm not going to be a hoodoo girly. I'm not going to be like, believe this. No. Trust me, I am a history minor. I'm not being like, but like, I know, like I did, my minor in history. I have a real respect for doing science, like just proving things and having a basis on things. And if I didn't believe, with my like if I didn't like see things and connect with astrology, the main thing I've learned is that there are what's the Taylor Swift song, Invisible String, I think it is, where it's just like there's things that are constantly in my mind that are like very similar and connections that don't have any scientific proof, where it's like, these things feel the same, these things almost look the same. There's so many connections and so many things. And I think as a child, I always noticed a lot of like similarities that I couldn't quite put into words. And as I got older and when I finally got into astrology, I finally, started like having almost some proof for that, where it's just like these two things are similar because they have a thing in common astrologically. Or it, to me, astrology is one way of expressing the similarities of energy represented in, different forms in various places. And so that's to me, I see it. And so I very, passionately believe in it. And that's all I can say, if you're interested in astrology, amazing. I love that. If you're not, that's okay. I don't care to swing you any kind of way. I'm doing this because I'm passionate about it, and I'm doing it because I really like it. And so, one of my missions is to bring a lot of, somewhat hard evidence to the table. But there is only so far I can go. And so I'm not going to try to push myself, I'm not trying to prove anything scientifically here. I'm just trying to be like, this is what I believe in, and this is it. This is what I have. I try to bring all of you get the spiel. But yeah, not that I know of, not scientifically proven. So if you were here because you thought it was, I would leave. I would leave and not listen anymore. All right, let's go to the third. Astrology is limited to sun signs. Obviously it's not. You wouldn't be listening here if it was. No. There's a lot. Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Saturn, Jupiter, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, Chiron. A lot of different points and, semi, moons and half dwarf planets and all types of stuff. Although the planets are the main planets, with Pluto in addition, because in astrology, Pluto is considered a planet. Yeah. There's a lot. So, yeah, there's way more than sun signs. You have much more to your personality. You have more nuance to who you are, and astrology is much more nuanced as well. If you're wondering about who you are emotionally and how you treat your emotions, how you deal with your emotions, look into your moon sign. You know what I mean? If you want to understand more about how you speak, about how you write, about how you think, look into your Mercury. Like, there's different... I'm not going to go in for every one, but it ain't just sun signs, man. It's a whole wide world. It's a whole wide world. All right. Astrology is incompatible with religion. Very wrong. Very wrong. No. Astrology really aligns with, not with like a lot of religions, but a lot of religions have a basis in astrology, or have somewhat of astrology within them in some capacity, which I think is really interesting. I think it's interesting how widely spread astrology is compared to how seriously it's taken. So, like, for instance, let me try to think. Hinduism. Oh, bang that. Hinduism. Vedic astrology. So deeply intertwined. You go into modern day India, and obviously previous to that as well, astrology is everywhere. It is everywhere. Not quite the astrology we see here in the West, but we obviously see sidereal astrology. Also known as Vedic astrology. And India, what is it? I'm trying to think. I don't remember the name of it, but India has its own kind of, like, Vedic astrology has its own, like, chart type where it's, like, drawn differently. There's an entire other world to it. And that's kind of deeply intertwined within that religion. And like I said before, astrology has a really deep spiritual basis, because when you're thinking about it like this, okay? If the stars derive meaning, where does that meaning come from, right? And so it derives a basis that there is something beyond our life today. Atheists believe that, you are born and then you die. But I think with astrology, there is that belief that there not is necessarily, well, there is like some kind of plan, but it's not as traditional as like religion, where it's like this, and this. It's very much because, again, astrology is not a religion. At least not to me, and I hope not a lot of people. Like, I wouldn't follow it blindly. I usually, for me, at least at this point in my life, I use it like a little psychic. I'm just like always aware, and it's always helping me out in case I need help. You know what I mean? But yeah, astrology, it has that spiritual basis in which you're like, okay, there is meaning here, and I don't know where the meaning has come from, but it's trying to show me in some kind of direction. It's kind of showing me about myself, and where does that come from? Where is this meaning being written? I don't know. To me, it's like, I always think from a point of, it's energy. Wherever energy comes from, that's where it's being written. Energy cannot be created nor destroyed. Well, it's coming from somewhere. Not necessarily being created, but it's circulating. It's going, it's coming. Where is it going? And it's coming. That, I don't feel like I said that well, but I believe that there is something beyond our plane of existence, and I think astrology kind of explains that in a way. From its kind of like its very basis. And then again, the misconception astrology is incompatible with religion. I think depending on the religion, it's usually very compatible, because usually astrology has made somewhere into religion. There are astrological symbols used in religion. There's a lot of intertwining happening. So it's very much compatible, because they work from, different periods of time, very much side to side, or just in a way together. Okay, and then we're done. Or we're going to try to find another page, because this was a very basic one. Let's see. Let's go to this. I'm just finding random ones from the internet. You have a we went over that. You have a singular zodiac sign. No, we went over that. So many ads. What the frick? Going on the internet is just a punishment. Astrology is a monolith. And they say there are numerous ways to study and practice. Yeah. I think I said it in the first or the second or the third one of the episodes, where it's just like, there are so many types of astrology, man. Like, there are so many types to study. When I talked about traditional and modern within, Western astrology, we were just talking about two very broad sides of Western astrology. You know? There is an entire other plane, an entire other half of the, again, and we're just talking about, very, European-centric astrology, right? There is, an entire plane of, Asian astrology and all the interconnected and different types of Asian astrology. I just talked about Vedic, but again, Chinese astrology, there's different kinds of other Asian astrologies, and then there's astrological, there is also, astrologies within the Americas, within the native population. There's so, indigenous. There's so many different types of astrology. When I talk about Western astrology, that's just one form of it. Because there's many ways to essentially get an answer. That's the way I think of it. There's many ways to get one answer. And so, there is multiple different kinds of astrologies all over the world. There's many different types that you can study within Western astrology. There's many types that you can, there's so many types to study. You can look very broadly and be like, I want to study traditional astrology, or I want to study modern astrology, or I want to study both. I personally study both because I'm like, why limit myself? Why limit myself? Because in my head, I'm like, both seem like they're bringing something very authentic to the table, so I'm like, I'm going to study both. But some people think to themselves, no, I'm going to only study this, or I'm going to only study this. Are they wrong? I don't know. Again, I can only go from my perspective, but they're learning something and they're providing some kind of information, so I think it's important. But there's so many types to study. Like me, I study kind of like a, modern and then traditional. Because a lot of people will be traditional astrologers. If you ever hear someone saying they're a traditional astrologer, or there's another word, I'm just forgetting it off the top of my head. But a lot of astrologers are very clear with that. They'll tell you. And so they're telling you one form of astrology, or a very limited form of astrology. I think it's a bit easier to learn, just both. When starting out, I wouldn't dedicate yourself just to one, going into stay straight traditional astrology. I'm like, no, get used to both. And if you don't like learning about modern, you can always just be like, no, and only learn traditional. But again, don't limit yourself. There's a lot of different forms. So yeah, there is definitely a lot of different forms. Let's see. Yeah, they bring up modern, Vedic, Uranian, many. Figuring out your horoscope is the main point of astrology. That's a misconception? Okay. No. It's definitely not. Your horoscope, if I haven't said this before, is basically just what's going on for you. It's a horoscope is just the transits and how they affect your birth chart. Or you could even look at I guess you could technically call a progress chart. That's something I'll talk about in the future. You can look it up, but it's called a progress chart or progressions. You look at that and see, because that tells you a lot about what's happening in your life and what's continuing to happen. It's just your chart that progresses over time. It progresses very slowly, but it still tells you something. But yeah, astrology is not just about figuring out your horoscopes. It's not just figuring out transits and this is also something that's really big. And I think your horoscope, that kind of stuff, transits was a main thing within traditional astrology, where it's not, you're very looking at something very objectively. You're trying to get like the main point of something and then going with that. With modern astrology, you're really looking inward at the person and their personality and their psychology. And so you're not looking at you're not really necessarily looking at a horoscope. You're looking at the person. You're looking, how does this person act? How does this person feel? What does this person do? What does this person aspire to be? What is all this energy going on with this person? So there's a lot to learn. And that's why I like learning modern astrology, because it's a very inward look at who we are as people rather than a very objective, when will war come? When will meteor strike? When will flood? Yeah. All right. This myth. Your natal chart stays the same, meaning you're hopelessly doomed to repeat everything. No, that is not true. Like, they say this in this poster, your natal chart will change over time. Yeah, like I said, there are progressions. So you can look at your progress chart. You can also always look at transits. There's something called a solar return chart. I think it's mainly used in whole sign astrology, if I'm not correct. I think I'm pretty sure I am, though. You could look it up. Look up solar return chart and then see if it's really specific to a whole signs chart. But yeah, there's many ways to look at, like, again, very obviously, people change. Different things happen in your life. Your life changes. You move. All these big different things happen. And that can be seen in your astrology chart. And I guess when you look at like your one chart, you're like, how can I see you can also see the future in your chart. You can see how things may change. Because I think it's one consistent thing I think about people is that inwardly, I think it is very hard for people to change. It really is. And so I think there will always be obviously be consistent themes that you see that you do in your life just forever. Unless like some big change happens. Like really big, like, trauma, or whatever else. It's just like something like that. But you're not doomed to repeat everything, different. Like in this very weirdly written misconception, you're not doomed to repeat everything. Things will always change. And I think you can see, or if you're afraid if things will like always be the same, I think that's more so where it's just like, you're afraid, well, if I'm like this, will I always be like this, or will my life always be like this? No. I would say sometimes you can be in a little bit of a rut. Let me say very honestly, I've been in a rut for like almost 2 years now. And I gotta be honest, I have one of the worst transits I think a person can have in their chart right now. It's not been easy. Or I have Pluto. Freaking Pluto. If you don't take Pluto seriously at all, you're delusional. It will find you and it will eat your children. Pluto has been oppositioning my natal sun sign since COVID. And so I've been dealing with that. And I probably have another 2 years to deal with that. Probably not as bad as it is now. Because we're just getting out of the bad. The bad has been in the last, obviously, like I said, the last year and a half. It's not been, last year and a half, 2 years. Ever since I graduated, things have been very hard. But, yeah, that is not an easy transit to have. But everything's temporary. Even transits with Pluto. Pluto transits are, if you have a Pluto transit, it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard because they are the longest, because Pluto moves the slowest, and so they last longer, and you're like, oh my god, I want to die. And I'm like, I understand. If you're listening and you don't know anything about Pluto, learn about Pluto. If you've been struggling for a hot minute, look at Pluto within your chart and look at within your transit chart, because it probably has to do with Pluto. But I've been dealing with that. And trust me, it's been a long time, but it's not going to last forever. I'm probably going to have to do a deal with Pluto for a lot longer in my life for a while. Probably the next 20, 25 years. I'm probably going to deal, or probably even more, going to deal with Pluto in some kind of heavy way. Not necessarily, obviously, like I said, it's not going to be oppositioning my sun time forever, which is freaking amazing. Not great. But I also have a Aquarius, or I have an Aquarius. I'm going to say it like Lana. Also, fun fact, big Lana stan. Love Lana Del Rey. Love her. What was I saying? Sorry for saying a lot of ums. I'm just getting used to this. But yeah, in one of her lyrics, and I think it was from, I forget which album, but she said my Leos and moon and my Cancers and sun, and the way she said it just cracks me up. It just cracks me up. But I'm gonna say it like Lana. But I have an Aquarius rising and an Aquarius south node and an Aquarius Uranus. Again, generational planets. But my big ones are, I have a rising / ascendant in Aquarius, and also my south node's in Aquarius. And so that Pluto is going to be eventually transiting them in the next, 15 years. So I got time, but still, terrifying. But I don't think it will be as, overwhelming as Pluto oppositioning your sun sign. It's kind of like Pluto oppositioning your sun sign is like putting your ego on an island and then leaving it there and being told it has to stay there for this long a time. At least that's what it feels like to me. It feels like and this is something I know, where it's just like you're just told, or like basically put in a way, your life is situated in a way where it's like you have no control. You have no control, and you're going to be screaming, crying, but you're just going to have to deal with what life throws at you. And to not try to very intensely grab onto control and deal with it, you're going to have to be like, no, you don't have the control. It will be okay, but you don't have control. And so, yeah, that's been happening to me. It's not fun. It's not fun. But that's not going to last forever. Even though it has been lasting for a hot minute, it's not going to last forever. So, transits don't last forever. Your progress chart changes. Everything changes. Your birth chart, your regular natal chart, is just a way to just look at the basis of things. Look at a sense of something. Or the main sense of something. That kind of stuff. All right, what's next? Okay, that article's done. Let's find another article. Just find a random article. Let's see. Is my chart... Okay, we're on Reddit now, so there's going to be more unconventional. Is my chart weird? I wouldn't... Okay, I've seen cringe charts. I have. I could... You know what? I'm just going to talk very freely and be like, what signs can be cringe? What signs can be cringe? Cat moons, and Aries moons. Oh my gosh. And I will say Scorpio moons. But I can honestly say as a Scorpio moon, I do not know that many Scorpio moons, which is very odd. But I don't. I've met very few. But what I have met a lot of is I've met a lot of Capricorn moons and Aries moons. And so I know how they are. But Capricorn moons and Aries moons are some of the most awkward people I have ever met. Aries moons will mask it better, but Capricorn moons, you can see it much more easily. So, I would say, and this is not being like, oh, you're cringe. It's like, they can easily be more cringe, because I think when you deal with your emotions like a Capricorn does, which is what, throughout your life, you push them down so far, or you deem them so unimportant that you couldn't feel, you're going to come off very emotionally cringe, I think. And they do. Or, when you're trying to be emotional, it's almost like you're a robot that needs to be oiled. Where it's like, what? How have you not taken care of yourself for this long? And then I think Aries moons, where it's just like they have so much going on emotionally, usually. They have so much intense feeling, and they're also they have emotional tunnel vision. And so something will be like this, where they're strapped onto this kind of emotion or this feeling or something, and they deal with it so intensely. it's going to come off a little bit wonky, or it's going to come off very potentially cringe to someone, where you're like, oh my gosh, how are you, like, calm down. Calm down. I know, like, for instance, my sister Harper, she's an Aries moon, and she'll be like, oh, I'm okay, like, I'm chill, and then in the next minute she'll be like, oh my god, why are you like this? And I'm like, it is 4 a.m, Harper. Can you go to bed? Like, it's been like that from time to time. So in my head, I'm like, I don't, like, is your chart weird? No, like, I don't think there's in my head, I'm like, I don't think of a chart, I'm like, this is weird. I think, oh my god. Usually I think one of two things when I look at a chart. I'm like, oh my god, this person's probably cracked the fuck out, so they're probably, I'm gonna have to put, like, an explicit warning on this podcast, because I don't feel like, I'm not gonna feel like editing this. But I usually think, oh, this person's probably really, like, fricked up, so they're probably really cool. Like, there's, like, a lot of squares, and there's a lot going on, especially in different, like, directions, so, like, oppositions and, like, different kind of things. And then I think, oh, this person is very boring. Like, when I see a lot of, like, signs in the same sign, but also, like, only, like, trines and sextiles, and very few, like, I'm like, oh, they're like SpongeBob when he got rounded off. He's like, they're boring. That's what I think. I'm like, oh, this person's going to be complex, or this person's going to be hell boring, or the third, which this person is fucked up and needs to go into a mental asylum. That's when they have too many oppositions and too many squares. And then, like, really bad trines. There is also, like, again, I'm what is it, generalizing, but, like, you know, all, like, sextiles and trines don't obviously mean good, and all oppositions and squares don't usually mean bad. But another question, am I doomed? I think I'm gonna cap this at, like, an hour, but we're at 42 minutes, so I'm gonna keep going. Am I doomed? Okay. I'm just gonna bring up placements that I'm like, if you have this, you might be doomed, but, like, from an internal perspective, where, like, or maybe, like, you're doomed from you're not looking at your behavior enough. Moon or sun opposite north node, also known as moon or sun conjunct south node. You people, oh my gosh. People don't look at the north and south node enough. Look at that. Look at it. Look at it. Look at it right now. It will tell you so much about yourself. Oh my god. People don't look. I love learning about north node and south node. It's probably one of the points of astrology. It's the moon's node, so, like, the south point of the moon, and the south and the north points of the moon, and it tells you about your fate and your karma. I love learning about this placement because it teaches you so much about kind of, like, where you need to be directionally in life, and what you need to start to not necessarily completely walk away from, but you work with less in your life. But I love learning that. I try to learn about this probably these points probably the most in astrology. But this placement, sun and moon conjunct south node, or sun and moon opposition north node, these people are some of the most emotionally destructive and just batshit. We're just like, oh my gosh, you only know how to have bad habits. I'm generalizing, but, like, and I'm joking, but, like, seriously though, they only know how to make bad habits. And, like, sometimes it's obviously not their fault, and it's just, like, how they were taught to live. But it is crazy. Like, when I see that in a chart, I'm like, oh my god, you're not doomed, but you might doom yourself. You know what I mean? You might doom yourself. Because the interesting thing is, the north to the south node opposition certain points, or like ascendant for the houses, those aren't necessarily important, because that's just showing, okay, like, for me, I have a south node basically conjunct my ascendant, and then it's therefore conjunct my 7th house, my descendant. And so you might look at that and be like, oh my gosh, like, you're rising, that's the third most important point, and that's opposition. Well, no, that's just indicating that it's in the opposite house. It does have its like, where it shows like, oh, this is hard, but when the South Node is specifically oppositioned, or not opposite, when the South Node is conjunct a planet, that's the hard thing. When the South Node is conjunct a planet specifically, and especially the personal, but like especially the sun and the moon, and even like what, Venus too, or even Mars. But those, yeah, if you have those right now, do research. Look into your self-destructive habits right now. Look into your self-destructive habits right now. For those people I feel bad for. Usually I'm like, okay, these people, they need the most help. When I see that and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna make this my entire, like when I look at a chart, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna make this in my entire like spiel now, is to help them out of their destructive habits. Because once, if you have, these placements, once you will see the light when you get away from your destructive habits. But yeah, I don't think anyone's doomed. Not even people with them. I think it's really just like, it's always like everything. It's always a person's perspective or how what they do with themselves. I think that maybe, more so makes themselves doomed. Okay, this next one. What sun sign am I compatible with? It doesn't necessarily work like that. And that's what they say the thing in this Reddit article. But yeah, I think that I will, like, hot take, I think there is ways to look at, I think this is my perspective on this, and I'm gonna go broadly too. I'm not gonna just talk about sun sign. You can look at who you're most compatible with and who you should be the most compatible with in your chart. You can. And I tell people this all the time. Look at your 7th house. Look at your 7th house element. Look at things connected with your North Node. 5th house, 11th house. But usually I like to like slim it down. So this is the way I think of it. And I think I'm going to give my friend Rose as an example. Because Rose, we talk about this, if you're listening, I mean, she knows. We talk about this all the time. But I'm going to use her as an example because I think she's a really good example. Rose has a 7th house in Gemini. And so, it was funny, when I first met her, she was like, I have a thing for Gemini men. She's like, why? I'm like, well, one, you're a Sagittarius. So she's also a triple Sagittarius. So of course you're attracted to Gemini placements. Of course. But then she also, obviously she has got this because of her rising. She's got a 7th house in Gemini. And so she's always, she loves Gemini. She needs Gemini. And so I'm like, okay, Rose, you like air signs because obviously she's a fire sign and fire signs are going to love air. Not in all, I don't believe in sunset astrology. Neither should you. So I don't think you have to marry someone who's necessarily, an air sun because you're an air, sun. No. Don't believe that. That is bullshit. But, because she has a 7th house in air, she's going to be attracted to some air people. But I noticed that her South Node is in Aquarius. And I'm like, hun, okay. You probably want to stay away or be very cautious with Aquariuses. But I think you'll do just fine with Geminis especially. They're number 1. They're in the number 1 spot. Or Libras. So I'm like, okay, put Libras in like 3rd, overall. And then I was looking else. I was like, okay, where's her North Node? Right? And I'm also thinking about, okay, she's a big fire sign. She's got a lot of fire energy. She needs a lot of fire energy. She needs a lot of she needs that consistency, right? Because it's in so much of her chart. So I'm like, okay, what else do we got? Her North Node, again, opposite to Aquarius, is in Leo. And so I'm like, okay. And it's in her 8th house too. So I'm like, okay, the wheels are churning. So I'm like, okay, you probably need a Leo. Or you'd be compatible with a Leo. And so I put like Leo like 2nd. So I put it in 2nd place. So in my head, I'm like, okay. So I'm looking at the North Node. I'm looking at houses that are very passionate. So like 5th, 8th, even the 11th house, because that's about friendship, a deep level of friendship. So I'm just looking at things that, when I look at compatibility, I mainly look at the person, what they need, and then I also look in extension their chart, and I add those two things together. So of course she's going to want a Gemini at some point in her life. And she also has Cancer in some parts because we're looking at, at this non-whole sign chart. So she's got Gemini and then Cancer in somewhat of her over her 7th house. So I'm like, okay, Cancer might be good in there too. You might be compatible with, a person who has a Cancer placement or two. Not too many, but a Cancer placement or two. But yeah, so I'm basically just looking at her 7th house, different elements that she should walk towards, the North Node, and then also just different compatibilities with herself. Because Rose, obviously, I didn't bring this up, but she has a Libra Mars. And then I think in that list, I also said potentially Capricorn too. But not too Capricorn heavy, but Capricorn, because she has a Capricorn Venus. And so I'm looking at different elements that she would be very taken to. But I'm also giving a sense to, like I said, her personality. And so I'm like, Gemini's number one. And so in my personal belief, although you can't very definitively say what a person's compatible with, you can definitely give your friends advice. If you know astrology, give your friends advice. If you see what sign their South Node is, be like, stay away from that sign. Or stay away from that sign in large quantities. You see what their 7th house? Push that, and, their South Node isn't in the 7th house, push them towards that person. Push them. I think there is ways to look at compatibility very heavily and what ways to push that person towards. Okay, we have similar charts. Is that why we are soulmates? I gotta be honest. Hot take. And this is for people who are not Libras. So if you're and even Libras too, but like Libras and Aries, I think I see this the least when I bring this up. But if you have the same sun sign as a person, it will end in divorce. It will end in divorce. Don't marry someone with the same sun sign as you. Even if you're Aries and Libras, take it very with a grain of salt. They're the only people I've seen it work more consistently, but still, be sus. Libras, I think it potentially works the best. But if you have cough. If you have the same sun sign as a person, and I'll bring up another thing. If you have the same sun sign and your sun is in the 7th house and their sun is also in your 7th house, you're okay. You're fine. You're not a part of this. I know one friend I have, I think that I looked at her chart once, and that her and her boyfriend are both Capricorns, but his sign and her own sun are in her 7th house. So I'm like, okay, you're fine. You're approved. Keep going with that. That is good. That's showing good, compatibility. But unless you have that 7th house going on with that, where it's like your sun and their sun are in your 7th house or vice versa, it will not work out. I have seen it. You're like, Anna, how do you have all this knowledge? I look at celebrity birth charts very, very, very loosely too. Very loosely. I'm not trying to be like, because we obviously don't know what time they're born. So I'm looking at very basic things. I've seen a lot of, at least well over 15 charts. And so this is what information is. So I'm not saying break up, but I'm saying be wary. If you're not happy, leave. But like, I've seen at least 15 or more charts of celebrities who have dated the same sun sign or been married or had significant relationships. And I've also seen it in like my friendships as well, where if they dated the same sun sign, it does not work out. Especially if you and that person's sun signs are conjunct, it will not work out. I'm going to tell you why. You both can't, you're expressing energy in a very specific way, right? And there's two of that. There's you and that person. And so eventually it's going to clash. This is one thing I've learned about like just compatibility and astrology. Too many similarities clash. Too many differences obviously clash. But too many similarities clash. And I think they clash harder than differences. Because the thing is with this, right? If you have too many differences, you'll just eventually grow apart. Like, it's just like, it's like, okay. But if you have too many similarities, you'll, I think, tend to feel like, oh, well, this is okay. We're very similar. It's like we're soulmates. It's like this. It's like, no, hon. And it's gonna, in my opinion, I think it clashes more than differences. I don't think I said that enough. But like, yeah. If you have very similar charts, I would not stay with that person. Unless they're very much within your 7th house or with your North Node or something like that, I would be like, it's probably not going to work out. At least in the long term. Because that's the thing. It's like, if you just want to hang out for a few years, like, just chill in a relationship, do that. I think a lot of people think when they get into a relationship, oh, already in it for the long haul. Stop thinking about relationships like everything is in the long haul. But let's see the next one. It's kind of a basic one. I only got 5 minutes left. My chart interpretation has contradictory statements. This doesn't make sense because I am always consistent and I act exactly the same in all situations. What the? I don't know where this question is coming from. I feel like, what the frick? But like, people are complicated. Yeah, it's like this person in the Reddit says, people are complicated? Like, yeah. So like, honestly, when I see people who are like, honestly, one thing that's really interesting with, I think, birth charts is how much do you see and how much do the people in your life see about you? You know? Because there's obviously going to be people in your life who see different parts of you that you don't see. Unless you're very aware of yourself, you're not going to see all the parts of you. You don't even see all the parts of you when you are very aware of yourself. So I think it's really interesting to talk about yourself in your chart with other people, because then you start to see more things about yourself that you don't even notice. That you don't even see. Yeah. Because I'm always... Yeah, you're not going to see everything, so don't pretend to. You're not going to understand every single bit about yourself, so don't pretend to. Let's go on to the next question. This person I like has placement. How should I act to make them like me? This person is like great. Like I'm trying to say my own perspective, but like they're being like, bitch, grow a skull, like, or like get a brain. But yeah. If you like a certain placement, and like, my thing is like, okay, if you're meant to be with them, they'll come to you. So why stress? You know what I mean? You know? It's like, oh, I want to marry a Capricorn. I'm like, okay, well then hang out in an office, I guess. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, if you want to like be with a Capricorn, just look for someone who's just like very like structured and like very stable emotionally, or very, you know, goal driven. You know, just look for that. Look for attributes rather than like, oh, do you have this placement? You know? Because you'll probably eventually find them anyway. Alright. I'm going, this next misconception. I'm going through some challenges. Is this because Mercury is in retrograde? I'll just, for the last 3 minutes, I'll talk about Mercury in retrograde, or just planets in retrograde. I'm pretty sure I talked about this in my last episode. But honestly, this is something I kind of, maybe I'm wrong for this, but like this is something I really hardly believe. Because like when Mercury's in retrograde, I won't always know because I don't always look. But sometimes I'll be like, what the frick is going on with the air? And then it's Mercury in retrograde. But it's like I am joking in a sense. But like, to be honest, Mercury in retrograde is so freaking obvious, because it's like there's so many, like, there's always a power outage. Twitter's always down. Instagram's probably down. There's something down. And so, like, if you're going through challenges, honestly, take a look if Mercury's in retrograde. Take a look if, like I said, Pluto's making, I mean, usually you'll notice more with Pluto, but, like, check if Saturn's, look, placements to check if you're, like, having a lot of challenges, like, especially more than you usually have. Check how Pluto's transiting your chart. Check how Saturn's transiting your chart. Check planets that are, you know, transiting your natal Pluto, your natal Saturn. I would say Pluto. If you have a negative placement in your chart that you know about, is Jupiter conjuncting that? Like, say, for instance, let me think. You have like, oh, for instance, if you have like a 12th house sun, right? or even a 12th or even a 6th house sun, and Jupiter's conjuncting your sun in that house, and things are going bad. I think people think of Jupiter as a very benevolent planet, and it is, but it also can increase the size of things already going on. And so if you're in a, like say for instance me, let me go back to all the way to 2020. Pluto is just beginning to, somewhat opposition in like a stronger orb, which is just like how many degrees apart from, the conjunction, was starting to, opposition my sun sign. And in that little mix, because of all the, all the planets in Capricorn at the time, Pluto was also in Capricorn. And so Pluto was also in conjunct the opposition to my sun. And at the time, my entire life, like most people's, but I think for me, I like to think it was a lot, like not like a lot harder, because obviously a lot of people, but in my own life, I think it was very hard because all I wanted to do was get away from my home, weird as a Cancer to say, and be able to like branch out in life. And I had just started to do that like a year and a half previously when I went to college, and I was finally branching out in my life. I was being more social. I was doing so many things that were good for me because I was a hermit for most of my, life growing up, all the way up into 18. And so going to college was one of the best things that ever happened to me. And then, being away from, like, having space with my family, all this was something I desperately needed. And then to have Jupiter on top of that opposition, that was already the Pluto opposition, my sun going on, I took it so hard. And there was also other things in my life that I was taking very hard, but that I took it so hard. And it was such a, really a dig to I felt like to myself, because I felt like I was, like, I really did feel at the time, I was like, oh my gosh, this is such a deep disservice to who I am. How I feel like I can't branch out at all. So, like, I would definitely check on, when you're looking at transits are a big help. If you're going through a rough time, look at Mercury retrograde and how that, it connects to you in your chart. Look at Saturn, look at Pluto, look at even where Jupiter is. Look at Uranus, unexpected things happen with Uranus. Look at Neptune, you getting absolved into dreamlike state. That also happens with Neptune. Just look at your transit chart. But yeah, we're at an hour and 2 minutes. So yeah, I'm thinking about doing more of these episodes like this where I'm just talking. Obviously I'll have new questions and I'll have different topics. I think next time I want to do it on like TikTok misconceptions, or talk about really interesting TikTok videos I see on my timeline, and then bring that into discussion. But yes, I was really glad to make this episode, and I like kind of the style of making episodes. I want to do the other type too, where it's scripted and I'm talking very in depth. But I also really like this type of episode. And I also will be physically recording. It's just a bit hard with my space right now to figure out how to record and stuff. But yeah, I hope you really like this episode of Astrology with Anna. And I hope to see you alongside the stars in the next episode. Bye-bye.